Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. I see some people are still getting connected to audio. Welcome, everybody. While everybody's getting signed in, if you want to click the CC button at the bottom, if you'd like to have subtitles, we have a live transcript, so you can click on there. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I know we still have a few more people coming in, it seems, so I don't want to start too soon. I would absolutely love it if some of you would turn on your videos. I don't want to pressure anybody, but it really helps me as a presenter just to see some faces looking back at me. So if you're able to, I would so love it. Thank you so much. Is it Denise? I hope I'm saying your name right. But thank you so much. If you're able to turn on your video, I would super appreciate it, but
yes.
No pressure.
It's so nice to see some of your faces.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun to talk to faces than to black boxes.
Definitely.
Welcome.
We have a really good turnout. We have 35 participants right now.
Yeah, we have a lot of people coming in.
Oh, there you go. Hi, Gauru, and hi, Catherine.
Gauru, thank you. And Catherine.
Hi.
I love it.
Good to see you. Hi, Stefania. Hi.
Hey. All right. Yeah, no worries if you don't have a camera, if you're not able to. If you can show me your lovely face, I really appreciate that sort of visual feedback, even though we're online. Hi, Michelle. Thanks for turning on your camera. Awesome. Thank you. Those of you that can, I appreciate it. All right, guys.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and get started. I think we're still going to have people coming in, but I have lots of stuff to share with you today, and I don't want to have to squeeze it all in. So thank you to those of you who are here and on time. My name is Denise, and I'm going to be your presenter today. I have with me Keiko and Lenilyn, who will be helping me out as well, helping me keep an eye on the chat. And answer any questions that you guys have. We have a huge turnout. This is way more people than I was expecting. So this is super exciting.
This is exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, and welcome everyone. Quickly, my name is Keiko Tsurumi, and I'm a faculty coordinator of a Teacher Prep Institute at Mount Antonio College. And today we are hosting this workshop, Don't Yell, How to Effectively Communicate with English Learners. And here with me, I have Elle. Elle, you want to say hi quickly? Okay, I think she's busy at this moment. So yes, we have a full house. Welcome everyone. And so we're going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and give the floor back to Denise because we have a lot to cover. So everybody enjoy. This is going to be a fantastic workshop. I have watched Denise teach this, present this workshop many times, and I learn so much every time. So I promise you that you're going to learn so much. Thank you, Denise.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Keiko. Just a little bit of business. We are recording today's session, and that recording, I believe, will be made available to you as well as my presentation slides. And if you are interested in having some subtitles on, I do have those enabled for you. So if you're interested, you can click the CC button at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be able to see real-time captions that are computer generated. And I think that's just about everything. And I'll get into this and I'll introduce myself here. So A little bit about me. I work at Mount San Antonio College. I have been an ESL adjunct faculty member, so English as a second language at Mount SAC since 2016. And I have been the program coordinator at the Language Learning Center since 2019. So I actually have two different jobs at Mount SAC, teaching ESL classes and also helping facilitate our language center.
No.
And I do also, in addition to that, before I was at Mount SAC, I have a total of 10 years of experience teaching and tutoring English language learners, as well as 7 years of experience training tutors and conversation partners. So I'm pulling all of that experience together to try to present to you guys some tips on working with English language learners, whether you intend to actually teach ESL or ELL classes, or if you're just going to be in either a staff kind of capacity or just working with students in general in any given population of students. You're in California, especially, you're going to encounter some English language learners, even if you're not teaching ESL classes. And so I hope to give you some tips and tricks to kind of work in those less formal ways, right? I'm not going to teach you in an hour and a half how to be an ESL teacher. That's, I have a whole master's degree in that. But I can give you some tips for those little interactions that you might have with ESL students, kind of throughout your, I got muted there. Whoops.
Sorry about that.
So I don't know exactly when I got muted, but yeah, as I was saying, I'm not going to teach you to be a teacher in this time, but I am going to teach you some tips and tricks that you can use when working with ESL students kind of in your day-to-day interactions with general populations of students. So that's something about me. I'd love to get to know a little bit about you. And because we have such a large group, I don't think I'm going to be able to have everybody introduce themselves. But I would, if you guys can either in the chat or just kind of give me a shout out, let me know what brought you to this workshop. Are you hoping to become a teacher? Are you hoping to work with elementary school students or with high school? What kind of age do you think you're working with or will be working with? We'll start with that. So if I could just get some either in the chat or some shout outs, what brought you here? Are you hoping to work with English learners or just students in general? What kind of age are you thinking of?
I could unmute and share. Hi, my name is Aaliyah Medrano. I am a senior at Cal State Long Beach. This is my last year. Next year, I do my cohort 1-year teach program with my teaching methods courses. I'm super excited about that. And I came to this workshop because I'm interested in English language learners. Also, I myself was an English language learner, so I know how it feels to have that pressure on me so young. And just like Spanish being like my first language, and also because like I came from a Spanish speaking country, I felt like, so I was always overwhelmed, and I always like hated going to school when I was younger. And also that's why I came, just to learn about how I can improve on that, because that's my goal. And me being a bilingual teacher, I know I'm going to make that difference with my English language learners, but it's still like there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing, Aaliyah. I see a few people responding in the chat, and I appreciate that as well. Yeah, definitely, especially seeing the ages you guys are interested in working with, that definitely helps me, or kind of, those of you that are currently working with, students as well. I asked this information to try to help tailor my advice a little bit, tweak what I'm saying to apply to the populations that you are working with or that you intend to work with. Great. Awesome. Oh, I've got a fellow TESOL professional here. I'm gonna feel judged. Great. And my second question for you is, what is your, sorry, I have automatic lights in here and they might turn off on me from time to time. I have to dance around a little bit to get them back on. So my second question would be, what is your experience with learning other languages? You know, whether that's, you know, that you grew up bilingual, or, you know, did you learn languages in high school or in college? You know, so if you guys can throw some of those answers in the chat as well. How many languages do you know? When did you learn them? Anything like that. The younger, the easier. That might be a myth, actually, Aaliyah. There's differences to learning languages at different ages.
Yeah, I'm a quadlingo.
Yeah. So
but
for
I
you,
felt that
the younger ones were easier.
I felt that especially learning Arabic was harder for me relearning it as an adult than when I was a child.
Yeah, and different languages can be more difficult depending on where you're starting from, right? If you're starting from a language like Spanish, languages like French and Italian will be easier for you than, say, Japanese, because they're more similar to your starting point. So learning a language like Arabic might be more difficult. Ooh, English is my third language. So we have some ELLs or ESL students in our group here. Maybe not students anymore, but awesome. Yeah, when I do these workshops, I do find that a lot of people, you know, English is my second language, English is my third language. Yeah, that's great to hear. So for those of you that learned English later in life, you know, you can draw on your own experiences. Like, you know what English learners need for sure. You know, but sometimes it's easy to forget, especially if your learning days, you know, your early learning is far behind you. Wow, I see lots and lots of second language, English as a second language or third language. Great. But honestly, even if English is your native language, any language study that you have done is going to benefit you when you're working with ELLs or English language learners, because you have that experience of not knowing a language and having to learn a language, especially if you learned it kind of after your early childhood. Because the way that we learn languages in early childhood, when we are babies or toddlers, the methods that our brain uses are very, very different from the methods that we use as older children or adults. The process that's going on in your brain as you're learning that language is very different depending on if you're a young child under 5 years old or if you're older than that. So depending on what population you're working with and your own experience learning languages, you might be able to draw on your experiences. Even if you learned a language in high school and you completely forgot it already, you know, you still have that experience that you went through of learning a language or trying to learn a language. So I encourage you to draw on that and think about that as we kind of move forward into some tips. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing in the chat. Feel free to keep sharing if you're still trying to type out a response. I love seeing that stuff, and I will definitely take a look at it afterwards as well. All right, so I have an agenda for us today, kind of an outline that you guys can follow along with me. You know, if you're taking notes, hopefully this is helpful. I've got 5 rules, and I hesitate to call them rules, but guidelines, tips, tricks, 5 things to keep in mind when you are communicating with, you know, I put on this slide adult English learners, but actually this would apply to any group. When I've given this workshop in the past, I've been focusing on adults, but I have sort of adjusted this because I know a lot of you are planning to work with younger people. And so these are rules for communicating with any English language learners. Don't worry about the fact that it says adult there. I just forgot to update this slide. So respect, don't yell, that's the title of our workshop. So I'll explain what I mean by that. To leave space, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. Monitoring your own language, thinking about what's coming out of your mouth as you're communicating, and being ready to teach. Even when you're not the teacher or you're not in front of a whole classroom, you need to have a teacher mindset as you're communicating with English language learners. And then we'll save a little time at the end for some Q&A. If you have a burning question as I'm going through the presentation, or if something, is going on, feel free to raise your hand or, pipe up, throw something into the chat. I've got my friends helping here. But in general, I'm going to try to save, questions for the end as much as possible, just so that I can make sure to cover everything that I have for you today. But feel free, if something's really, you got a question that you want to ask, go ahead and ask it in the middle. All right. Here we go. So rule number 1 would be respect. This is a group of my students. Obviously, this is pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, but this is a group of my students from Mount SAC. English learner students often experience a mismatch between their language ability and their actual mental capacity. So we have this situation where, I work with adults. And so my adult learners, they might have degrees, they have families, they might even have jobs or, past careers in their country. And then they come here and they don't have the same kind of language skills to express their thoughts that are going on in their mind. And the same is true at any age. If their language is at a lower level than let's say this, if their second language, English, is at a lower level than their first, whatever their first language may be, there's going to be a mismatch between their thoughts and their words when they're talking to you in English. So it's really, really important to keep in mind that whatever's in their mind is probably a lot more complex than what they have the language to express, what they can actually say out loud. And this means that in general, as these English learners are going through life, they are often being talked down to. They're being aged down by the people that they interact with. And so they may have a lifelong or, everyday life experience of being treated like a little kid when they're a teenager, or being treated, as younger than they are, being treated like a child when they're an adult, or being treated like they're somehow unintelligent or, have issues with their capacity, when in fact, it's just an issue with their language. And so that's something really to keep in mind. We don't want to talk down to English learners. We want to talk to them like we would talk to anybody else at their age and developmental level. But we want to make some adjustments in our language, not in the attitude that we have or the way that we're treating them, or in what we expect from them, because they are probably capable of the same kinds of tasks as other students their age. And this is true whether you're talking to your students, or those of you that want to work in elementary or high school. If you're talking to parents, if you're talking to immigrant parents, this may also be a similar situation to keep in mind, that just because they can't express themselves as an adult or as an older child doesn't mean that they don't have that inside their mind. And that can be very frustrating for them to try to deal with, especially for kids who have trouble already maybe managing their emotions or managing their frustration. They might really be dealing with a lot here. So rule number 2 is don't yell. As the title of this workshop implies, many people sort of unconsciously, when they're not being understood by someone, I'm a native speaker, I'm trying to talk to someone who is an English learner, they're not understanding me. What is my impulse? My impulse might be to say it louder. You don't understand me. I'm going to talk louder. I'm going to yell at you. And that's really just adding more stress to the situation and not really helping. Another impulse might be to slow down what you're saying and try to speak carefully. And if you notice, what I'm doing there with my own language is I'm distorting it. I'm not making it any easier. In fact, I'm making it more difficult by stretching out my words. They no longer sound natural. And for somebody who's learning the language, it might even be unintelligible when I do that. So here's a little experiment for you. This doesn't work, right? Speaking louder, speaking more slowly. Just a little fun experiment. I'm going to play a sound for you. Let me make sure my sound is being shared. And I want you to tell me what this sentence means. Give me a moment to organize my screen here. All right.
Zullen we een ijsje halen?
Do you guys know what that means? No, right? Okay, let me try making it louder. Let me make it louder.
Zullen we een ijsje halen?
Still no? What? I was louder though. Okay, I'll slow it down. Slow it down.
Zullen we een ijsje halen?
How about now? Nothing? Let me write it out for you. Let me write it out. Now you can see the words. Still not getting anywhere. It looks more like a sentence, but we're still not getting any meaning from this. Okay, what if I show you a picture? Does this help at all? Understanding the meaning. I see some nodding. You might have some idea. Any guesses as to what this sentence means at this point? Should we get ice cream? I see in the chat. Somebody heard Olive Garden, want to share an ice cream? Okay, so you have some guesses now. You see the sentence, you know it's a question because of that question mark. You see an image, so you're having a better idea. What if I say, je l'envoie in Eichenhallen? Je l'envoie in Eichenhallen? Oh, we might get further away. Oh, okay. Do you want to go get an ice cream? Do you want to go get an ice cream? So now, when I've put together some charades and a written sentence and a picture, now you're starting to be able to make some sense of it because I've given you enough clues to the meaning. Now, I had a friend help me with this to get some Dutch because I tried to pick a language I didn't think it was likely anybody would have studied. So if you're a Dutch speaker, I thank you for not spoiling my surprise. But yes, we need to provide them clues, provide English learners clues. And it can't just be shouting, it can't just be slowing down, because as you guys saw, getting louder, slowing down, if you don't know the words, it doesn't help, right? Those kinds of impulses that we have aren't very helpful, unfortunately, because if you don't know the words, you don't know the words. It doesn't matter how loud they are or how slow they are. So that's what not to do, but let's move forward and focus on what can we do instead. Instead of getting louder, instead of talking down to them like they're children or unnaturally slowing our speech, what can we do to help with intelligibility, to help with communication for these English learners? Rule number 3, this is sort of a general mantra you can give to yourself when you're working with English language learners, and that is to leave space. Leave space, leave time, leave processing. And this can be broken down into kind of 3 different things that I'm going to explain. Understanding the value of silence. Those of you who are teachers or are in teacher training, you probably have already heard of this. It goes double for English learners. Being a good listener, and then a strategy I'm going to show you called chunking. So let's talk about silence and listening, because these really go hand in hand. Silence is golden. And this is true in any teaching situation, but especially with English learners. Silence is processing time. We have to get comfortable with some dead air as teachers and as people working with English learners. You have to be comfortable with the silence, with what might feel like an awkward silence in a normal social situation. We have to just learn to make our peace with that, because especially our English learners, they need that processing time in order to take in what you're saying, maybe translate or rework it in their mind, and then to form a response and give it back to you. That all takes extra time. If you think you've waited too long, wait a little bit more. Count to 5 before you speak, until you're used to being comfortable with this silence. Aaliyah, do you have a question?
Actually, I really love that you say this, because in my growing up, like Spanish was my first language. Growing up, I literally had to stop and think and try to translate in my head. And I feel like that itself was a process. So I'm really glad like you saying this.
Yeah, this can be one of the simplest things, is just to have some patience. And this can be difficult, especially if you're in a situation that, you need to move people through, right? If you are limited in your time, this can be really hard, but just know that rushing someone who's trying to process your language is not going to help. And it's actually going to harm their ability to process. If they start to feel stressed, there's actually research to show that when we feel stressed or anxious about our language, our ability to use language shuts down. And so if somebody's feeling rushed or pressured to give a response or something like that, they might become incapable of doing it in that moment. And if you've ever been in a situation where you didn't speak the language and you suddenly had to give an answer, that sort of feeling where 10 seconds ago, you knew how to say that thing in your second language. And as soon as you're put on the spot and you have that pressure, you can't do it anymore. It's gone. You now know nothing in that language that 10 seconds ago you could have gotten by in. So that's something really to keep in mind, is being patient, especially when we're online. There might be a slight delay with the technology. So even more so, we want to give a few extra seconds to that. And while you're doing this, kind of the flip side of it is to take time to actively listen. They may not be able to express themselves in a perfectly grammatical or perfectly natural way. So you might have to do a little interpreting of your own. You might have to take the English that they're giving you. It might not be standard English that you're used to. You might have to take that sentence that they gave you, and you might have to interpret it to figure out their meaning. Even if they are speaking in English, because of their background or their their current ability, it might not be the way that you would expect them to say that idea. So you might have to take some time to really listen, get the keywords, and piece together what they're trying to communicate with you. If you can't understand their words, ask them to write it out or to show you a picture. Oftentimes, and my English learners here, you can maybe attest to this. Oftentimes, especially if they've learned English in a classroom initially, they might be stronger writers and readers than they are listeners and speakers. They might be struggling with pronunciation, especially when people learn language after puberty. Pronunciation can physically, biologically be more of a struggle for them. So, that's where you get a thick accent. You have somebody struggling to actually form the words. If you can't understand, don't just keep asking them to repeat if it's not working, right? Maybe ask them to write it down. They might be much more competent in writing. And so if you ask them to write out what they're trying to say, it might click instantly, where their speech might be a little bit further behind their level of writing. Or have them show you a picture of what they need, or show you the email that they're trying to understand. Have them show you something, and that can be a fast track to better communication. Questions? Anything? All right. So my third sort of strategy under this broader heading of leaving space is something called chunking. And you can think about this as breaking big texts of language into smaller chunks. So instead of saying several sentences all kind of quickly, you want to break it into pieces that are easier to understand. those of you that are native speakers or fluent speakers of English, how would you naturally say this sentence? If you were just talking to your husband or your girlfriend or somebody, how would you speak this? Most likely, you're not going to say each individual word. You're most likely not going to say, "What do you want for dinner?" That's just not how we talk, right? You're probably much more likely to say, "What do you want for dinner? What do you want for dinner?" Right? This is how you would speak when you're speaking to somebody that you're comfortable with in your native language. We do this in every language. When we're comfortable, we tend to whoosh, and English speakers especially are very guilty of this. We tend to kind of shove all those words together, especially those little words like do and you that might not be really crucial to the meaning of the sentence, right? What do you want for dinner? It's all smashed together. If I talk this way to somebody who's learning English, they're going to be completely overwhelmed because they've never seen this word, this one word, "What do you want for dinner?" That's never come up in their life before because it's not one word, but we speak it like it is. So let's look at a more complex example. So if I'm looking at these sentences, how can I mix in some pauses to make this a little bit easier to understand? If I'm talking to a fluent speaker, I might say, "I have a study group for my econ exam in the library today at 3. And I kind of run a lot of that together. But if I'm talking to an English learner, I'm going to put in some extra pauses to break up what we call thought groups or meaning groups. So these slashes are representing a pause. I can say, "I have a study group for my economics exam in the library today at 3. And I'm giving a pause after each bit of meaning. The first bit, "I have a study group," that by itself has meaning. So I'm gonna give that chunk and then take a breath. "I have a study group for my economics exam," another little bit of meaning. "In the library location," that's a bit of meaning, "today at 3. And then I use 2 slashes here to indicate a larger pause, as we would normally do between sentences, right? So I'm going to give you guys a little activity here. I want you to try this out, and I'm going to give you a little bit longer text. And I'm going to send you guys into breakout rooms because I want you to kind of work this out with, a couple other people, talk about it. If you aren't familiar with Zoom, you might not know when you go into the breakout room, you will no longer see my screen. So feel free, take a picture of my screen here right now. I'm also going to paste this text into the chat for you. So if it's easier for you to kind of use it from the chat, you can kind of copy and paste into a document or just use it from the chat there. Let me just paste that in. Oops. Go. All right. So I pasted that text into the chat. I'm going to send you guys into breakout rooms, and I would love for you to attempt to break this text up. This is from a TED Talk, so it is spoken language here. And think about, where would you put some pauses? Where would you break it up into meaning groups or thought groups? You can use slashes or double slashes, or you can just talk about it if you don't have an easy way to mark up your screen. And just think about it. I will say, going into this, there is no one right answer. It depends on a lot of factors. Situationally, it might be different depending on, who you're speaking to and how you speak. So just keep that in mind. Don't get too stressed about finding the right answer, because there isn't one. There's lots of different ways that you could potentially chunk this, but I want you guys to give it a shot here. All right. Any questions before I send you to the breakout rooms? So make sure to grab a picture of this, or just check out the text in the chat, and then go ahead and click on join, and you can discuss it with a few people. All right, guys, welcome back. Let me share my screen one more time. So I was kind of popping into your breakout rooms and I didn't hear a lot of discussion. So I'm guessing a lot of you maybe aren't able to, turn on your mics or something where you're at. But can anybody share with me kind of how this experience trying to chunk out language went with you? Did you have any ideas about where you might put in pauses or anything?
Yeah, I can try. Hi.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you,
Um,
Shannon.
so in the breakout room when we were talking, we said that we think that I will never forget. That would be a appropriate way, appropriate spot to pause for a moment,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
then after that, the first time, because that's a common thing for people to say. I think is the first time this, and it kind of just ends right there.
Yeah, to give a
We'll stop
little
there.
pause right there.
Yeah, and then I would say I would visit it because uh it's a verb, so learning a new language probably stop right there. And then a client in jail.
Okay.
Or I visited a client and then in jail. Either way, something there needs to be broken up.
Yeah, yeah. So I was trying to look for my annotation settings and I'm not seeing them. Uh So I could kind of mark what you were saying. Apologies for that. Yeah, I'm not seeing that option here. So yeah, I'm actually hearing you put in like a good amount of pauses, like kind of a lot of pauses, which is not, again, there's not one right or wrong way to do this. You kind of said I will never forget, I think, the first time I visited, and then maybe even another one after a client in jail. I would say that that's on the high end of pauses that I would put in this sentence, but if I was speaking to somebody who was very low English level, then that might be appropriate. If I'm speaking to somebody who's maybe kind of intermediate or a high intermediate level, I might use fewer pauses to get my speech more to a fluent, more natural state. So you're going to need to adjust based on who you're talking to. And honestly, when I'm making those little pauses in my speech, I'm also taking that split second opportunity to look at their face and kind of read, is this working for them? Do I need to slow down? Do I need to add more pauses? Do I need to speed up or, add fewer because they're getting impatient with me? So, it takes a little practice to do that effectively. Sorry, my lights. It takes a little practice to do that effectively to kind of gauge how you're doing in relationship to their language level. But you're looking for those sort of micro facial expressions. If they start to look confused, you might need to give more chunks, more pauses. If they start to look like, okay, come on, they're feeling impatient, then that might be a signal to you that you can go a little bit faster. Yeah, Cassandra in the chat said it was weird at first, but then we talked about chunking by subject. Those of you who are comfortable with English grammar, you might recognize some sort of grammatical points where you can put in some chunks. Different clauses or phrases might be good clues if you're somebody that thinks like I do in terms of grammar. Yeah, pauses might go after a major detail, right? So the first time might be a major detail, or the heavy metal door. That's a complex subject with multiple adjectives. So after door, I might put a pause. Yeah, Shannon.
Hi, I'm glad you said that about the pauses, that it's dependent on the student, because now that I'm looking at it again, you could just make two pauses. I will never forget the first time, and then I visited a client in jail. Very simple, but someone with higher understanding could probably be taught in that way. So I'm glad you said that.
Absolutely. Yeah. You definitely want to cater it, so your first initial response, Shannon, was kind of more based on somebody who has very, very low English, and you really need to give them a lot of processing time. But with somebody who's a little more comfortable, a little more confident, but maybe still needs some support, yeah, you might just break this into 2 or 3 chunks. The other thing to take into consideration is your own language. I had somebody ask me one time in this workshop, they said, English is not my native language. Their words, I have a thick accent. If you know that something about your speech is maybe particularly difficult, you might want to include more pauses because you know that your own speech, if you have a, Spanish language accent and you're talking to another Spanish speaker, that might not be a barrier. But if you have a Spanish language accent and you're talking to a Chinese speaker, that might create an additional layer of complexity to the communication. And so you might need to adjust accordingly. So it's based not only on the learner, but it's based on you and your language and your abilities. Yeah. So just for, an example, this is maybe kind of a middle of the road example for an intermediate or low intermediate learner, how I might chunk this up. I might say, I will never forget the first time I visited a client in jail. The heavy metal door slammed behind me and I heard the key turn in the lock. The only connection to the outside world was a small window placed too high to see. So this is one example. Again, there is no one right way. If my learner needs more support, I break it up more. If I'm talking on Zoom and there's a bad connection, I break it up more, right? Depending on the situation and the factors. If you're speaking with a mask on and they can't read your lips, even, everybody reads lips to a certain extent, even if, you're not hard of hearing. If you're talking with a mask on, all of a sudden, half of your facial communication is gone. There's a muffling of the sound. You might need to add more pauses. You might need to break it up a little bit more, right? Great. Moving on to rule 4, monitoring your own language. So we've talked about slowing things down without distorting, without stretching out our words. We're slowing it down by leaving pauses, leaving space. But the actual words that are coming out of your mouth, how are those affecting your learner? Take a look at this conversation. I'll give you a minute here to read it. This is a very simple conversation, simple ideas, but this conversation would be incredibly difficult for an English learner. And I wonder if you can tell why. So I'll give you a minute to kind of read through the conversation. Even though it's simple ideas, it would be really difficult. See if you can tell me why.
It has some slangs in it.
It has some slang, some informal language.
Yes, informal language that has been used. So
Yeah. Can anyone give me examples, specific words that you think would be troublesome?
ring a bell.
Ring a bell. Using
That catch
idioms.
my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. Using idioms. Karu, did you have something you wanted to share? I saw your hand. No? Okay. Yeah, ring a bell is a good example. Stabbed me in the back. Cassandra in the chat said acronyms. The word unfriended. Yes, all of these different kinds of slang or informal language might be really difficult for different reasons. Let me show you another version of the conversation where I've highlighted some of these issues, right? Unfriended. Unfriended is kind of a slang term. It's internet lingo. It's probably pretty common everyday kind of language for those of us that are fluent in English, but somebody who's learning English, they're not going to find this word in their textbook. They're not going to find it in a vocabulary list that they're studying when they're learning English. So that's something that's going to be challenging. Idioms like stabbed me in the back or ring a bell. If the learner has encountered this idiom before, they might recognize it, but more likely they're going to get an instant image of the literal meaning. They're gonna be like, stabbed, like a knife, what? Or a bell, like the phone, is it ringing? And even if they know the meaning of the idiom, you're adding a layer of processing, right? When you use these kinds of phrases. So even if they happen to have learned the meaning of the idiom, which is a big if, they still have an extra moment to process because their first mind is going to go to the literal meaning. And then if they're able to recognize that it's an idiom and they happen to know the meaning, they might get there eventually, but it's going to take them an extra step of processing. Also, I love Cassandra mentioned acronyms like ROTC, right? And ROTC specifically is doubly difficult because not only is it an acronym, but even if I tell you what the letters in the acronym mean, if you don't have the cultural context for what that is, then you're still not going to understand. So sometimes acronyms are double layered because you have to have some specific knowledge or scaffolding to even understand, even if you know what the spelled out meaning of the letters is. So that's another kind of difficult thing, cultural references or acronyms. For the best, another idiom, the word chaos. Chaos is an abstract term. It's not something concrete that we can see, that we can touch, right? So words like this are going to be more challenging, especially for beginning learners, because it's an abstract idea. It's harder to translate. It's harder to wrap our mind around, and it may not have a perfect translation. The more abstract something is, the less likely it is to translate 100% into another language in a perfect way. So one thing you can do is try to check yourself, try to imagine if you ran your speech through Google Translate, how do you think it would come out? How do you think, a computer could process your language? If it's full of idioms and acronyms, it might struggle. It might have some translation errors. And the same is happening for your students. If you ever want to have some real fun, try running something you say, actually put it into Google Translate, send it to a very distinct language like Chinese or, Korean, and then send it back to English and see what you get back. And that might give you a good indication of how difficult your language might be. Now, importantly, you don't want to completely eliminate these kinds of phrases from your language. One, it would be really difficult. This is habit for you as a fluent speaker. And two, you really shouldn't. You shouldn't eliminate these phrases from your language, because even if you do, the next person that your learner talks to on the street may not. And they need to, at a certain point, get comfortable with this kind of idiomatic, informal slang language. So you just want to limit it. You don't want your speech to be peppered with these, idioms and expressions and slang and all of that. You want to limit it so that they have time to process each difficult term and that it's not coming boom, 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 one right after the other, right? So try to pull it back and be ready to teach the informal phrases, the acronyms, the cultural references that you do use. Be prepared that your student might not understand that. And so you might need to use that as a teachable moment, a little mini lesson to help them understand the next thing. Which leads me into rule number 5, being ready to teach. And again, here, I'm not talking about standing up in front of the classroom and giving a prepared lesson. There's a time and a place for that. I'm talking about more like in your day-to-day conversations, taking a quick minute and giving somebody a teachable tidbit, showing them a new vocabulary word that you've used and they have not understood. You might need to help them with that specific word or phrase, especially if it's something that's going to be important to what you're discussing with them or something that they're going to need to know for the future. So there's a few different things I have here. There's a lot of information. I'll try to get through this as best I can, but knowing your grammar basics, using visuals, categorizing vocabulary, channeling it into something that's easier to understand, and when all else fails, consulting a learner's dictionary. So let's break these things down one by one. Knowing your grammar basics. Some people love grammar, some people hate it. You don't have to be a grammar whiz to get through this, but I do want you to call back to some of your early elementary English lessons where you might have heard things like noun, verb, adjective, right? You might have some of these language terms. Do you feel comfortable with these terms right now? If I gave you a quiz, could you explain them? Anybody? The silence I'm taking as a no. Catherine, thank you for being brave and giving me an answer. Probably. Okay, I got another no. Yeah, you can give me an answer in the chat. That's fine. Yeah, depending on your background and your particular, areas of expertise, you might be real comfortable with this. You might not. I would encourage you, got a couple of yeses here. If you are not comfortable with these terms, try to get there. If you're going to be interacting a lot with English learners, because especially older English learners, those that have learned English in a classroom in some capacity, this is how they understand new words. They know, okay, if I learn a new word, is that a noun or a verb? And that gives them a lot of information about how they're going to be able to use the word, what kinds of sentences they can use the word in. It really gives them a lot of information about the meaning. So if you're able to say, when they encounter a new word, you're able to say it's a noun, you're giving them a huge leg up in their ability to understand and use that word in their own speech. So really quickly, I'm going to throw up some definitions here, right? A noun is a person, a place, or a thing. Verbs are action and feeling words. Adjectives describe nouns. Adverbs describe verbs. And then subjects and objects are nouns with specific jobs. The subject is the first noun in a sentence, usually is the doer of the action, and the object is the receiver of the action. That's it, just these terms. You don't need to know every rule of English grammar, but if you're able to kind of frame words as saying this word is a noun or this word is an adjective, that's going to help your learners who this is how they're learning in their books. You're helping kind of make those connections between what they might learn in an ELL classroom and what, they're learning in the real world as they have a conversation with you. For time's sake, I'm gonna skip past this right here, just trying to find some examples of nouns, verbs, etc. So another thing that you can do is to use visuals. For example, gestures and charades, not the actual game of charades, although that's a good classroom activity for ELLs, but gesturing, right? You guys remember when I did the Gillenwood and Eichenhallen, right? It helped a lot when I was saying Gillenwood, right? I'm gesturing, I'm saying we, in, we go, right? Eichenhallen, and I'm gesturing for the ice cream. So those gestures, those acting it out is going to help a lot in understanding. When I teach low-level English classes, I get a workout because I'm doing so much gesturing. I'm saying, okay, we're running, and I'm running, right? And we're cooking, and I'm stirring a pot. And doing those big gestures really can help a lot with the understanding. And it's something you can do while you're still speaking. So you're getting two kinds of input to the student at once. When you're online, gestures are a little bit harder. It's a little more difficult to fit that into your Zoom box. But something you can do online is using Google Image and screen share. Or if you're in person, Google Image on your phone and then show them your screen. Images are great because images are universal. If I use Google Translate and I translate my sentence into their language, I don't really know if the translation is a good one. You know, we've all seen examples of like translation fails, Google Translate fails, right? Where something goes into Google Translate and for whatever reason, it doesn't translate well. It gets confusing. The message gets broken. It gets lost. If you don't speak their language, you don't have any idea if the Google Translate you're giving them is accurate to your message and your meaning, and vice versa. So Google Image, however, if you look up an image of what you're trying to talk about, you can recognize if the image is a good description of what you're talking about or not, because the image is universal. So for concrete concepts, for things you can see and touch, an image is worlds better than a translation, a blind translation where you don't know. You're just trusting that Google Translate is giving you a good translation of whatever you're trying to express. And, you know, if you're online, you can use screen sharing to help share those images with the student. Another way to use visuals is to write it or draw it out. If you're online, use some kind of virtual whiteboard. I really like Ziteboard because it has a lot of cool options for text, for drawings. But any kind of virtual whiteboard where you can share a blank screen and write things up. Or if you're in person, a piece of paper or a real live whiteboard. As I mentioned before, you know, learners might be much more comfortable in reading and writing than they are in listening and speaking. So if you can present the information in a written form, that might help them a lot. Their listening skills might not be as strong as their reading. In fact, when I'm working with English learners online, I like to share my screen and kind of type out bullet points of what I'm trying to say as I'm saying it. So I'm giving them, again, two kinds of input. They're seeing the key points and they're hearing my voice. So hopefully they can piece together the message there. And the same is true, ask them to write it out for you. If they're having trouble expressing themselves verbally, ask them to write it out. And that might be an easier way for them to communicate. Another thing that you can do, especially if they encounter a word in your speech that they aren't comfortable with, you can be ready to teach a new vocabulary item by categorizing. And I'm going to call on my Dutch friend again to give me a Dutch word. So what's frustrant? Anybody know? No, right? This is a word you've never seen before, unless you speak Dutch. All right. So let me tell you, it's a noun. It's a person, place, or thing. I'm going from general to specific with my clues. So I'm gonna, you know, get you to it by starting out very general. I'm gonna say it's a noun. It's something you drink. Any guesses now what it might be?
Something with strawberries.
Something with strawberries.
I don't know.
Interesting.
It's like freeze. It's
Okay, so you're
It's
trying to
another-
maybe connect to a different
Yeah.
language.
yeah.
I saw Cowrie, you had a water bottle, it looked like there. Maybe it's some water. It's something you drink. Okay. It has a lot of sugar. Well, so probably not water, right? Perhaps something like lemonade or soda, something refreshing, something cold. Okay. Another clue. So I'm going again, general to specific. I'm getting into some
Chocolate milk.
here. It fizzes. It fizzes. Oh. And if I start to run out of clues I can give, don't
Soda?
forget, I could look up a picture.
Soda?
Soda. Yeah, so if I look up a picture, now I'm getting across the idea very quickly, right? So this is something I might do while I'm searching Google Image. I might say, fruit drink, it's a noun, it's something you can drink, it's sugary, it fizzes. Oh, here you go, here's an image, right? And so now I provide them with the image, they can make the connection given my clues. Again, moving from general to specific. How would you describe a hoverboard? Start general. What kind of word is it?
Noun.
It's a noun, right? It's a thing. Okay, so let's say it's a noun. Can we put it in a category? What category would you put this in?
Transportation.
Transportation? Sure. So it's a mode of transportation. Okay, that's similar to me saying it's something you drink, right? It's a mode of transportation. What else? Let's be more specific. And imagine we don't have a picture.
It has wheels.
It has wheels. How many wheels?
2.
2 wheels. Yeah. So now I know transportation with 2 wheels. In the chat, it says you stand on it. You stand on it. That's huge because that's the difference between a bicycle or a motorcycle, right? And a hoverboard. You stand on it. So that's something very specific. So you could say it's a compound word. Break it up. Yeah. Compound words, break it up, right? Hover, board. What does hover mean? What does board mean? You can break it up by those 2 pieces. Yeah, definitely. So categorizing vocabulary, starting with general, it's a thing for transportation, and then getting more specific into its characteristics can help a learner to understand without resorting to just translation. Because again, translation is hit or miss, right? If we translate it correctly or not. Finally, something you can use is to consult a learner's dictionary. And this works particularly well for abstract concepts that are not easy to get images, not easy to explain in, categories like that. For more complex ideas, I highly recommend making use of learner's dictionaries. These are some of my favorites. And what is a learner's dictionary? It's a dictionary. It's English to English, so it's not a translation, which is good because, again, it avoids translation errors. English to English, but as you probably know, when you look up a word in a standard dictionary, often the definition of the word is more complicated than the word you were trying to look up, right? The definition introduces 10 more words that you need to now look up in the dictionary, and you play this game of like, now I have to look up these 10 words. That's frustrating and that's not helpful. Learners' dictionaries are designed for English learners, so they present the definitions in simple language that is generally considered more simple than the word they're looking up. So they're taking into account, if the student is looking up this word, how can I explain it to them? What level are they at that they're looking up this word? And how can I explain it to them in words that they will understand, in terms they'll understand? These are 3 of my favorites. I encourage you, if you're working with English learners, get these apps on your phone, bookmark the website so that you have this kind of handy, because this can be a great way to give them a quick definition without resorting to a potentially flawed translation, and to teach them a new word in a way that you can know that you're giving them a quality translation of that word or a quality understanding of that word. I will say my very favorite Longman Dictionary, their app is really expensive. It's like $25, but their website is free. So, just bookmark the website for that one. The other 2 have free apps that are easy for you to use. So that's another resource that you can utilize and share with your English learners so that they have it at the ready. They have this website bookmarked, this app downloaded on their phone. So, quick review. When we're working with ELLs, we need to start with respect. Take into account that their mental age, their physical age, their mental age is probably at a higher level than their language skill. And don't fall into the trap of talking down to them or aging them down in the way that you speak to them and interact with them, just because their language skills reflect a lower mental capacity. Don't yell. Don't sort of artificially slow your speech down in a way that distorts your speech, because you're just making it more difficult to understand you and potentially more stressful, which gets their stress response up. Instead, you want to leave space, leave silence, leave processing time. Listen carefully and maybe interpret what they're saying to make it make sense. and break your language into chunks. Add more pauses rather than slowing down your speech and stretching it out. Add more pauses instead. Monitor your language for those slang terms, those idioms, those cultural references. Limit their use and be prepared to teach the ones that you do use. Be prepared that the learner may not understand and you might need to supplement there. And in the spirit of being ready to teach, we looked at a few different ways, using visuals, writing it out, using images, using learner dictionaries, categorizing vocabulary, knowing kind of your grammar basics. This is a noun, this is a verb, that sort of thing. Questions. What do you want to know about talking to English learners? Feel free to put questions in the chat. Good. I'm glad you guys found this helpful. Thank you, guys. I appreciate those compliments. What do you do when class can get frustrating for some students? Yeah, so this is a hard situation in especially like a K-12 school setting. Depending on your situation, you may have students who are in separate classes while they're learning English, or you may have like a pull-out period where they have an English teacher for one period and they're in mainstream classes the rest of the time. So it is going to depend on your specific situation. Yeah, and I think the next question kind of maybe dovetails with this a little bit. How do you help them without them feeling like you're upset? Students can get easily frustrated when they're learning English. And we want to try to be empathetic to that and be understanding of that. Because again, remember that they are going through life being treated like they're stupid or that they're dumb, even if they're not, I hesitate to use those words, but in their life, they're being treated like they're not smart because they don't have the language in English to express themselves to their mental capacity, right? So they might often be treated as if they're not smart. They might be treated as if they're much younger than they are, and that's at any developmental age, that's a problem, right? That can affect our sense of self-esteem. That can make us feel frustrated. So even before they're in a frustrating situation, just know that they're dealing with sort of a constant level of frustration in their life as people treat them down from where they're at. So being empathetic and being understanding is a first step. Also providing them with resources when you can, showing them how to use a learner's dictionary. Like I said, that can be a great resource for students. We want to move them away from translating, just because translating, again, can give broken translations. It can also, it's really a crutch using translation. It can get you through in a pinch, but it's not going to help improve their language long term if they're translating big amounts of text. So we want to help them move beyond translation if they're kind of leaning on that, by giving them resources that they can use. Definitely taking all of those things I said about like leaving space, giving more pauses, and that can be useful to all of your students. Right? Obviously, if you're talking to a whole classroom, you can't direct your speech just at one student. I understand that. I'm a teacher. But you might be able to adjust your speech a little bit because the median of your class or the median of your group maybe needs a little bit more support because you have those ELLs in your classroom. Yeah, how do you help them without them feeling like you're upset? That definitely, you've got to have your patience on your end, giving them that processing time, because if if you're rushing them for an answer, you're raising their stress. So you don't want them to feel like you're upset. It goes back to, facial expressions matter a lot when you don't have that communication barrier. So even if you're not a very smiley person, you might want to be really conscious about how your face is maybe showing your own frustration at the situation, which can easily be misinterpreted as frustration with the learner, like they're doing something wrong. And, reach out for support. If you're in a situation where you have 28 students and you have this one English learner that needs a lot of support, I would encourage you to reach out to your administration or whatever support systems you have in your place of work, to try to see if you can't get a tutor, if you can't, in the classroom, if you can't get an aide in the classroom that can help provide extra support to that student. Helping them feel welcome. I want to speak to that because, and this is something that I think is improving over time, our sort of recognition of diversity. But traditionally, our textbooks tend to include a lot of blonde white children, right? Or people. And seeing themselves represented in classroom materials is going to help them feel welcome. So if you have, students from different cultures in your classroom, and this doesn't just apply to those learning English, but just in general, if you can use materials that are more representative of the students that you have in your class, of their race, of their religion, that's going to help them feel more welcome just by seeing themselves in the materials that you're using. When you have very culturally diverse classrooms, like in a specific ESL class, it's always great to, draw on their experience from their culture, have them share, oh, in my culture, we do it this way, or in my culture, we do it this way. But be careful if you have a kind of a homogenous classroom, you don't want to single out the one student who's from a different culture. So if your classroom is very diverse, have everybody share things about their different culture, but don't single out an individual student just because they're the exotic one. You don't want to do that. Yes, a copy of the slides will be available through the Teach for LA website, I believe.
And also, if you guys don't mind, if you want a certificate of attendance, if you can put your name and email address on the chat, and I'll notate them. Thank you. Thank you, Denise.
Yeah, I was just reading a longer question there, and I'm glad somebody asked this one. Students don't want to ask questions. So, how do you get them to not be afraid to ask questions? And I think part of it is going to come from you being a little bit more proactive to see what questions they might have. And again, a lot of this, and this is why I made this my rule number one, is respecting their age and their mental capacity where they are, treating them the same way that you would treat another learner of their, similar developmental stage. Because you've got to remember that going through their life, they're being treated like they're not smart. And so that can really wear and tear on their self-esteem and their psyche to the point where they're like, I'm just dumb and I'm not going to ask a dumb question again because I'm going to see the teacher get frustrated that they have to, repeat themselves or something like that. And of course, that's not the truth, right? We know that they're not unintelligent just because they don't speak English, especially when they might speak several other languages. But they're in a situation where, assuming that they've immigrated recently, they're kind of constantly being faced with people thinking that they're not smart, or that there's something wrong with them or something like that. So, recognizing that they likely are, less wanting to ask questions because of that. Culturally, they might not want to ask questions because in their culture, it might be disrespectful to interrupt the teacher. Even, things like raising your hand might not be universal across cultures. So, you want to recognize those things, maybe pull the student aside and say, hey, I want you to ask questions. I want to know what you're thinking. But also, trying to anticipate when they have questions, looking at their face, to see their facial expressions. When are they looking confused? When are they looking checked out? Because maybe it's all gone over their head too much. Listening fatigue is real for anyone learning a language. At a certain point, you listen and listen and listen. And even if you're trying really hard to understand, if you get too much input that is too high of a level for you, your brain will kind of stop processing it. It's called listening fatigue, as in your brain gets tired of listening and it just sort of shuts off. So, you want to watch for that. A student who appears unengaged might actually be experiencing listening fatigue, and they might need a break. They might need a moment to kind of, reset and reprocess. So, depending on your situation, how you address that might look a little bit different, but hopefully just understanding what's going on with their situation in their mind, hopefully that will help you to help that student in a better way. Looking, got lots of emails here. I don't think I see more questions necessarily. Any other questions I can hopefully answer?
I would just like to say thank you. I don't work with ESL students right now, but I do mentor a young lady. What am I saying, young lady? We're 1 year apart. I do mentor her, and she's she's from the Ukraine. Unfortunately, because of the war, she did go to Germany right now. But I'm like seeing all these things, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to implement them when we get to connect again. And
yeah.
You gave so much great information. I would like to say thank you.
Thank you so much for that feedback. I really appreciate it. And actually, you reminded me of something else too. When we're, especially right now with the situation in Ukraine, anytime we're dealing with immigrant populations, you want to be mindful of the fact that they may have immigrated for less than desirable reasons, right? They may be coming to you, they may be learning English, coming off of some kind of trauma, and that can affect their ability to engage in the classroom, their ability to learn anything, including English, right? Because we know that students who are experiencing trauma or experiencing stress in their lives all around are less, they have less capacity left to learn new things and to explore a new language, right? Because they might be dealing with some trauma from whatever it is that brought them to the United States. So that's definitely something to keep in mind and be mindful of, and try to provide support where you can. Yeah. Thank you so much. Cool. Any other questions? Could probably take one more. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for hanging with me. Again, the slides and the recording will be available from Teach for LA. And we have your contact info, those of you that are looking for a certificate of attendance. So thank you guys so much. I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned something, and good luck to you guys. Have a great day.
Oh, Justina,
Thank you.
if you're still around, we need your email address and not the you gave me a really good mailing address there.
Not your physical address. Yeah, Justina.
If you're still here, please provide us your email address.
Oh, thank you, Max. If you're still here, you warm my heart with your comment. Yay.
It's good. If not, then we're gonna look through the Zoom registration. So it should be okay.
Okay, yeah, we could do that. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.